I sat there frozen, the roast beef untouched on my plate, as the sting on my cheek pulsed hotter than the chandelier light above us. My daughter-in-law's words still cut through the silence. Stay quiet, quiet. After building this house, after raising my son inside its walls, after becoming the grandmother who held their child through fevers and fears, I was told to stay quiet. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The china plates clinked faintly beneath the weight of silence. Roast beef, scalloped potatoes, a perfect kale salad, untouched. The chandelier above flickered slightly, as if even the lights were holding their breath. Vanessa Morris raised her wineglass with a smile so tight it looked stapled to her face. To family, she said, voice brittle. Her diamond bracelet glinted as she took a slow sip. Across the table, Helen Morris placed her fork down gently. Her hand trembled, but only slightly, the kind of tremble that wasn't from age but from fury laced with restraint. She glanced to her left, where her son Eric stared blankly into his plate, jaw locked, eyes unfocused. Mom, Vanessa said suddenly, that saccharine tone shifting. Napkin on your lap, please. Or are we not doing manners anymore? Helen didn't move. I said, Vanessa's voice sharpened, you're not in your own house anymore. You're just a guest here. Try to act like it. The slap was swift. Not wild, not chaotic, but deliberate, controlled. Helen's palm landed clean across Vanessa's face with a crack that echoed off the walls and silenced even the hum of the fridge. Lily, 17 and wide-eyed, gasped. Her fork slipped from her hand and clattered against her plate. Eric flinched, but said nothing. Vanessa recoiled, one hand flying to her cheek. Her eyes blazed. You crazy old... Helen stood. I may be old, she said, voice low but cutting, but I'm not invisible. She turned and left the table. Eric! Vanessa shrieked. Say something! Are you seriously going to let her? But Eric still said nothing. Helen's cane tapped rhythmically against the hardwood as she moved down the hallway. Not fast, not embarrassed, just done. Behind her, Vanessa's rant blurred into white noise. Lily stood and chased after her grandmother. Gram, wait, she whispered. Helen paused at the base of the stairs. Lily's eyes were swimming. I didn't know she'd... I'm so sorry. Helen didn't answer. She just placed a wrinkled hand gently on Lily's cheek, brushed a lock of hair behind her ear. I'm okay, Helen said, but I'm done asking to be treated like family. Upstairs, the hallway was dim and still. She passed framed photographs, Eric in high school, Lily as a toddler, a wedding picture of Vanessa in white, and Helen off to the side, almost cropped out of the frame. That photo had always bothered her. Tonight, it burned. In the guest bedroom, her room now, as Vanessa reminded her daily, Helen locked the door behind her and sat at the edge of the bed. Her hand still stung. But it wasn't the slap that made her pulse race. It was the decision forming quietly, steadily in the pit of her stomach. Downstairs, the arguing had stopped. The house felt colder. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Carol Abrams. Helen answered. I did it. Carol's voice was dry. You slapped her? She deserved worse. She always will, Carol said. But listen to me. Next time, don't fight at the table. Helen closed her eyes. Then where? In court, Carol said. Where it hurts more. Helen didn't speak for a long time. Then, I need a lawyer. You already have one, Carol said. I'll call him in the morning. Helen ended the call. She lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling, one hand resting on her chest, steadying her breath. The other curled slightly into a fist. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere in the neighborhood, Christmas lights blinked through the frost-covered windows. But in this room, there was no warmth, no holiday cheer, just resolve. The office smelled faintly of old paper, oak polish, and winter air, the kind that clings to coats and hangs around too long. Helen adjusted her scarf as she stepped inside, nodding politely to the receptionist. Ms. Morris, the woman said softly, already rising. He's ready for you. David Stein's office was tucked into the 20th floor of a glass building downtown, tall enough to overlook Lake Michigan, far enough from the suburbs to feel like another world. Warm wood shelves lined with legal books surrounded his desk like armor. Behind him, the skyline glowed pale blue beneath a cold sun. He rose as Helen entered, buttoning his jacket. "Mrs. Morris," he said, voice calm but sharp-edged. "I've read Carol's notes, but I'd rather hear it from you." Helen lowered herself into the leather chair without hesitation. She set her purse down, folded her hands. Her knuckles were still faintly red from the slap, but she didn't hide them. "She calls me a guest in the house I paid off," Helen said evenly. "Tells me to be grateful when she lets me eat dinner upstairs. My son doesn't stop her. My granddaughter pretends not to hear it, but she hears it." David nodded once, not interrupting. "There's a lock on the basement door. Last week she asked Eric to install a camera outside my room, said it was for my safety." David raised an eyebrow. "Did he do it?" "No, but he didn't say no either." A long silence settled between them. Helen met his gaze without blinking. David leaned back, opened a folder, and pulled out a pen. "Let's talk about what you own." Helen reached into her purse and withdrew the envelope she'd prepared. Inside, the house deed, 2 savings account statements, and shares from a local medical supply business her late husband had co-founded decades ago. She laid them out like playing cards. David's eyes narrowed with professional interest. "You hold the cards, Mrs. Morris. Let's play them." A quiet knock broke the moment. The door opened. Carol Abrams stepped in with her tote slung over one shoulder, her paralegal badge clipped to her coat even though she'd been retired 10 years. "Thought you might need a witness," she said, setting her reading glasses on the desk. Helen gave her a grateful smile. "You always think ahead," Carol winked. "It's how I stayed married for 43 years. David brought out the document. Together, they began amending the trust. Eric's name was removed. Vanessa had never been on it to begin with. The new beneficiary. Should anything happen to Helen? "Lily," Helen said, her voice firm. Carol looked up. "You sure she's ready?" "She's more ready than her father ever was." Behind the cracked office door just out of view, Lily Morris stood frozen. She hadn't meant to follow, but she had. She'd skipped school, ridden the train in alone, trailing her grandmother like a shadow. And now, with her back pressed against the hallway wall, she listened to everything. When Helen emerged a half-hour later, freshly notarized documents tucked into her bag, she nearly bumped into Lily. Helen's eyes widened. "Lily? What on earth?" "I heard you," Lily said, her voice small but clear. "Everything. The trust, the accounts, the house." Helen froze. "You shouldn't be here." "I needed to be," Lily said. "I want to help. I will help. They're not going to get away with this." Behind her, David and Carol exchanged a glance, surprise, then understanding. Helen looked from her granddaughter to the office door behind her. "Do you know what this means?" Helen asked. Lily nodded. "That we stop pretending." Helen reached out and took her hand. The next morning, the breakfast table was a stage. A carafe of coffee steamed beside a bowl of grapefruit slices, scrambled eggs, dry toast. Vanessa always made a point of cooking something bland when Helen was present, as if seasoning was a privilege, not a birthright. Helen took her seat without a word, her posture straight, her cardigan buttoned high, her wedding ring still on her finger, polished and glinting in the gray morning light. Across from her, Vanessa wore red, lipstick, nails, the lining of her silk robe. A queen dressed for war. She slid a stack of papers across the table with theatrical ease. "Just a little housekeeping," she chirped. "Legal stuff. Nothing major." Helen didn't touch them. "What kind of legal stuff?" Vanessa sipped her juice. "The deed. Eric and I thought it'd be cleaner, you know? Consolidate ownership. You're not getting any younger. If something happened, God forbid, it'd be a mess to sort through." Helen glanced at the papers, crisp, bound, a notary line already highlighted. Eric, seated beside his wife, stared down at his plate like it was a mirror he didn't want to look into. "I see," Helen said softly. Vanessa leaned forward. "You just sign at the bottom, then we file it, and that's that." Helen picked up her coffee with a steady hand and took a sip. "Well, that does sound convenient." "Exactly," Vanessa smiled. Helen studied the documents now, taking her time. 1 page, 2, then a third. Her eyes didn't betray a flicker, but inside, something twisted. The signature line read, "Helen Morris hereby relinquishes all interest and ownership in the property located at..." She set the stack down gently. "I'll have to think about it," Helen said. Vanessa's smile cracked. "Think about what?" "It's just standard paperwork." "Oh, I'm sure it is," Helen said, voice like satin. "But my memory isn't what it used to be. I'll need a few days. From the hallway, Lily stood just outside the kitchen entrance, phone angled low, recording. Vanessa rolled her eyes. You're being ridiculous. Honestly, Mom? Sometimes I wonder if you understand how estate law even works. I'm learning, Helen said. Fast. That was when Vanessa slipped. Her tone sharpened like glass. You should be grateful we're even letting you stay in this house. You don't pay rent. You don't clean. You just sit there with that miserable look on your face. If I were you, I'd be signing whatever's in front of me before that room gets a little too crowded. Eric flinched. Lily's phone didn't waver. Helen simply nodded, rose from the table, and walked away, without another word. Later that afternoon, in David Stein's office, the papers sat between them like evidence in a criminal trial. David ran a gloved finger along the page's margin. This is a legal landmine. She tried to bury you under your own roof. Helen watched him with the calm of someone who'd already seen the worst. Is it criminal? Borderline. No disclosure, no proper notary. She'd need power of attorney, and she doesn't have it. She assumed you'd just sign. She underestimated me, Helen said. No, David corrected. She needed you to stay small. He slid the documents into a folder, labeled them fraudulent, and placed them in his case file. We'll hold on to these. Carol, seated in the corner, crossed her legs and let out a quiet breath. Well, it's begun. Helen didn't speak for a moment. Then, I want Eric's name removed completely. Done, David said. You're protected now, but once we file this, it won't stay quiet for long. From her seat by the window, Lily looked up from her phone. I have the recording, she said. From breakfast. Everything she said. David raised his eyebrows. She know you were filming? She will. Helen didn't look at either of them. Her gaze was fixed out the window, toward the haze of the city skyline. It was snowing now. Not heavily, just enough to dust the buildings in cold clarity. She tried to erase me with a pen, Helen said. Let's see how she likes ink used properly. The boxes were already stacked at the top of the basement stairs when Helen came back from her walk, labeled in thick black marker. Books, winter clothes, misc. The kind of vague, guilty handwriting that tries to make cruelty look like organization. Vanessa stood at the threshold, arms crossed over her chest, perfectly manicured fingers tapping her elbow. I thought we'd get a jump start, she said, almost cheerful. There's so much clutter up here, and Lily's applying to colleges soon. She could use the space. Helen didn't reply. She just removed her gloves and hung her coat in the closet. I figured your things would fit better downstairs anyway, Vanessa continued, now following her into the kitchen. There's room, and we can set up a space heater. We'll make it cozy. Eric stood at the kitchen counter, nursing a mug of coffee like it was an escape hatch. He didn't look up. Helen poured herself water from the tap. She stirred it slowly, even though there was nothing in it. Eric? She asked softly. He flinched, then turned. It's not permanent, he mumbled. Just until we get Lily settled, it's practical. Helen looked at him for a long time, not angry, just disappointed in a way that felt deeper than rage. Then, no. Vanessa's smile twitched. Sorry? No? Helen said again, this time without flinching. I'm not going into the basement. Eric opened his mouth to say something, closed it again. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice as if Helen were hard of hearing. It's not up for debate. Helen's eyes narrowed just slightly. Then you'll have to carry me down there. The silence stretched. Vanessa's mouth opened, but whatever venom she planned to spit dried out halfway. From the hallway, Lily's voice cut through the quiet. Try it, she said, stepping into the room. Try to lay one hand on her. Her eyes locked on Vanessa's like twin blades. She was shaking, not with fear, but fury. Vanessa barked a laugh. Oh, please don't get dramatic. Too late, Lily snapped. I've already recorded the last 2 days. If you think I won't go full dramatic in a courtroom, try me. Eric set his mug down a little too hard. Coffee sloshed. Lily, he began, but she cut him off. No, Dad. You're not going to guilt me into silence. Not again. She's your mother. Eric looked away. Helen stepped forward, gently placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. It's all right, sweetheart. No, it's not, Lily said, voice cracking. But it will be, Helen replied. Soon. 2 hours later, back in David's office, Helen sat across from him, composed as ever. David tapped a pen against his legal pad. They tried to forcibly relocate you. Not in so many words, Helen said. but the implication was clear. I don't need implication, David replied, sliding a folder across the table. I need intent, and your granddaughter just gave me 27 minutes of it. Helen nodded. Then let's not wait. David began drafting the restraining directive, a soft legal boundary. Not a full order, but a shot across the bow. The message, you don't own her, and this isn't over. Carol arrived just as David was printing the first draft. Well? She asked. They tried to bury me under the stairs, Helen said calmly, folding her hands. Carol raised an eyebrow. And did you let them? Helen gave a small smile. No. David passed her the papers. We'll have this filed by tomorrow. They'll receive notice by certified mail. Carol leaned against the bookshelf, arms folded. Good. She glanced at Helen. This isn't estate planning anymore, she said. This is war. Helen nodded once. I know. The courtroom was quiet, clinical. Beige walls, humming fluorescents, and a judge whose robe looked more like a warning than a formality. Helen sat upright at the petitioner's table, hands folded in her lap. Her pearl earrings were the only ornaments she wore, and even those felt like armor. Across the aisle, Vanessa Morris looked every inch the concerned daughter-in-law. Soft blouse, sympathetic eyes, a stack of evidence in her lap. Beside her, Eric hunched in his chair, looking like he wanted to melt into it. Judge Howard scanned the file with no hint of expression. You're petitioning to declare Mrs. Morris legally incompetent? Yes, Your Honor, Vanessa said, slipping easily into the practiced cadence of someone used to getting her way. We've noticed confusion, memory lapses, episodes of erratic behavior. Last week, she slapped me at the dinner table in front of my daughter. Helen didn't flinch. Vanessa continued. She refuses medication, accuses us of theft. She even tried to block access to financial documents we managed jointly. We're worried for her safety. Eric said nothing. The judge looked at him. Mr. Morris, do you support your wife's petition? Eric hesitated. I just want what's best for my mother. The judge arched a brow. Is that a yes or a no? Eric looked down. Yes. David Stein rose from his chair. Your Honor, may I call Mrs. Morris to testify? Proceed. Helen stood with quiet dignity and approached the witness stand. She moved slowly, not for effect, but because 71 years of life had earned her the right to take her time. Mrs. Morris, David said, can you tell us your current address? Helen smiled slightly. 347 Bayberry Lane, which I own, outright. And the name of your primary care physician? Dr. Alicia Kumar, internal medicine. I saw her 3 weeks ago. Clean bill of health. David nodded. Do you handle your own banking? I do. I also file my own taxes. And would you say you're of sound mind? I'd say I'm more sound than the people trying to bury me under a staircase. A murmur fluttered through the gallery. The judge tapped his gavel lightly. Watch the tone, he said. But there was something in his expression that suggested he was trying not to smirk. David stepped aside. No further questions. Vanessa rose before the judge could speak. Your Honor, may I request that Helen undergo a psychiatric evaluation? I believe she's manipulating the situation. The judge turned to Helen. Do you have anyone else you'd like to speak on your behalf? Helen didn't answer. Lily stood. I do, she said. The judge blinked. You are? Lily Morris, her granddaughter. David motioned her forward. She approached the witness stand, hands only slightly trembling. I live in the same house. I've seen everything. The way my parents talk to her. The way they treat her like a burden. She pulled out her phone. I recorded it. All of it. She hit play. Vanessa's voice filled the courtroom. You don't pay rent. You don't clean. You should be grateful we're even letting you stay here. The judge held up a hand. That's enough. Vanessa's face was white. Eric stared at the floor like it might swallow him. The judge turned to Vanessa. I don't find your petition credible. In fact, I find it insulting. This woman is competent, clear-headed, and, apparently, more legally prepared than either of you. He slammed the folder shut. Petition denied. David gathered his files, but didn't sit. One more matter, Your Honor, if I may. The judge gave a nod. David pulled a document from his briefcase. Not thick, not dramatic, just a single, damning page. We've received confirmation from First Cornerstone Bank that a $250,000 loan was issued last year, using Mrs. Morris's name and forged signature. The courtroom went dead silent. Vanessa blinked. David continued, unblinking. Handwriting analysis confirms the signature was not Helen's. The funds were transferred to a joint account belonging to Eric and Vanessa Morris. Will be filing criminal charges within the week. The judge looked like someone had handed him a grenade. Who forged the signature? He asked. David didn't answer. He didn't have to. All eyes turned to Vanessa. The courtroom reconvened after a 20-minute recess. Vanessa didn't return right away. She remained in the hallway with Eric, pacing, flustered, voice hissing behind closed glass. Inside, Helen sat with the patience of someone who'd seen storms before and learned to wait out lightning. Carol leaned in from the bench behind her. She's cracking. Helen didn't nod. She didn't blink. She's been cracked, Helen said quietly. Now the world's just starting to notice. David stood again as the bailiff announced the return of the court. Judge Howard took his seat with a sigh like he'd aged a year in the last hour. All parties present? Vanessa and Eric entered together. She had reapplied her lipstick. He looked like he hadn't breathed since the break. Proceed, the judge said. David stepped forward, accompanied now by a man in a crisp gray suit with a leather folder tucked under his arm. Your Honor, this is Charles Kimball, certified forensic document examiner, 31 years in service, former consultant for the Department of Justice. The judge nodded. Sworn in? He is. Mr. Kimball took the stand, flipping open his folder. We analyzed 3 separate documents, 2 known samples of Mrs. Morris's handwriting and the signed loan contract presented to First Cornerstone Bank. And your conclusion? David asked. The signature on the loan is a forgery, Kimball said flatly. It bears no consistent stroke pattern with Mrs. Morris's hand. The spacing, slant, and pressure are indicative of an attempt to replicate her cursive under duress, but not skill. He flipped a page and held up a blown-up comparison chart. Whoever signed this was familiar with her signature but lacked the muscle memory of habit. David turned back to the judge. We've submitted the chart to the court, along with Kimball's full report. The judge looked at Vanessa. Care to respond? Vanessa opened her mouth. No words came out. Mrs. Morris, the judge added, turning to Helen. Do you recall signing any bank paperwork in the last 18 months? Helen's tone didn't change. No, Your Honor. Would you have approved a loan of that size for your son or daughter-in-law? Helen looked directly at Eric. Absolutely not. Judge Howard frowned, then motioned toward the back of the courtroom. Bailiff, bring in the bank rep. A woman in a navy blazer and tight bun entered the witness stand. Her badge read, Manager, First Cornerstone. David nodded to her. Can you confirm who withdrew the funds? She checked her tablet. Yes, sir. Disbursement was made to a joint checking account. The authorized user present at the time of withdrawal was Vanessa Morris. Helen didn't move. She didn't gloat. Her hands stayed folded in her lap, unmoved. Thank you, David said. No further questions. The room fell silent. Eric looked down at his hands as though seeing them for the first time. When he looked up, his eyes flicked between Vanessa, the judge, and his mother, like a man searching for an exit in a room with no doors. I didn't know, he said, barely above a whisper. She told me it was from her parents, an early inheritance. The judge said nothing, just watched him stew in it. Vanessa's jaw was tight. Her hands were balled into fists in her lap. Helen turned slightly, enough that both of them could see her face. Every signature, she said softly, leaves a scar. Carol behind her gave a grim little smile. That's the thing about ink, she muttered. Doesn't wash off. The judge sighed, rubbing his temple. Mrs. Morris, Mr. Morris, he said flatly, you are now under formal investigation for bank fraud. You may retain separate counsel. Court will notify you when charges are filed. Lily reached forward from the row behind and placed her arms gently around Helen's shoulders. I'm so sorry, Graham, she whispered. Helen patted her hand. Don't be, she said, voice calm, eyes forward. They just made my case for me. Vanessa stood in the center of the kitchen, phone clutched in her hand like a live wire. Her face was red, her voice shrill. What do you mean the account's frozen? That's our money? Eric hovered by the fridge, silent, chewing on the inside of his cheek like it might keep him from vomiting. Vanessa paced, scrolling, tapping. I tried 3 cards today. 3. Declined. My Nordstrom account is locked. The Amex flagged fraud. The mortgage autopay bounced. She spun to Eric. Say something. Eric's voice came out flat. What do you want me to say? Vanessa narrowed her eyes. Say that this is your mother's fault. Say it. He didn't. just ran a hand down his face and muttered, Jesus. Upstairs, in the quiet guest room, Helen sat beside Lily on the edge of the bed. A legal pad rested on Helen's knees, filled with tidy rows of notes and account details. Lily leaned over and pointed. This one. What's that tied to? Helen smiled faintly. The business shares your grandfather left. Solid investments. They've been growing quietly while your parents were busy chasing short-term credit limit. Lily blinked. You're leaving them to me? Helen nodded. The trust has already been amended. You're the successor trustee, effective immediately. But Lily sat back. I'm 17. You'll be 18 in 6 months. David will hold the assets in escrow until then. I trust you to protect them better than your father ever could. Lily swallowed. You really think I'm ready for this? Helen turned to her and said simply, I do. Downstairs, Vanessa slammed the phone onto the counter and crossed her arms. This is abuse. She's retaliating against us. Eric looked away. Vanessa jabbed a finger at him. She's using the courts to ruin us. Eric finally snapped. You used her name to take out a loan, Vanessa, without telling me. You forged it. Now we're facing criminal charges. Vanessa laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. Oh, now you grow a spine? A little late. He flinched. She turned and stormed toward the garage, yanking her keys from the hook. I'm going to the bank myself. Let's see them say this crap to my face. Back at David Stein's office, Helen sat calmly across from him, papers spread before them like a quiet battlefield. David clicked his pen and pushed a file toward her. These are the fraud charges. I'll be filing them with the county DA tomorrow. Helen skimmed them. Include the account numbers tied to the home loan. If they can lie about that, they can lie about anything. He nodded. We'll hit hard and fast. The judge already suspects there's more under the surface. This just confirms it. Carol leaned in from her chair by the window, her voice low and clear. The storm hasn't peaked yet. No, Helen said, sliding the signed page back to David. But I'm not standing in the rain anymore. She stood and straightened her coat. David raised an eyebrow. Where are you headed? To change the locks, she said simply. That night, Vanessa returned from the bank seething. No one would even talk to me, she barked. Security had to walk me out. One of them knew who I was. He smirked. Eric sat at the kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey and 2 empty glasses. We're in real trouble. Vanessa ripped off her heels. No, we're not. We fight it. I'll countersue. I'll tell them she manipulated the trust, that she's pitting Lily against us, that Lily's on her side, Vanessa, he said. Everyone's on her side. Vanessa's face twisted. She's an old woman with a cane. Eric looked up. And she's beating us. Vanessa grabbed the bottle and poured herself a drink. From the staircase above, Lily watched through the railing. She said nothing. But in her pocket, her phone was already recording. The velvet box was still there. But the necklace wasn't. Helen stood over her bedroom dresser, fingers resting lightly on the empty satin lining. The antique diamond necklace, a wedding gift from her late husband, had been tucked safely away for years. She opened the drawer again, slower this time, checked the floor, her nightstand, her jewelry roll. Gone. No note, no misplaced clasp, no accident, just gone. She didn't panic. She didn't call for Lily. She simply sat on the edge of the bed, exhaled once, and closed the lid. Downstairs, muffled laughter echoed from the living room, the television humming through yet another evening of stage distraction. Helen stood, reached for her coat, and walked to Lily's room. She wore it last week, Lily said, eyes wide. Vanessa, she wore it. I thought it was weird, but I didn't say anything. I didn't know it was yours. Helen raised an eyebrow. Where? At the school fundraiser. She was showing it off to the board wives, said it was heirloom, from Eric's side. I remember because Mrs. Cutler said it looked like an estate piece. Helen nodded slowly. Did you take pictures that night? Lily's eyes lit. Wait. Yes. She grabbed her phone, scrolled fast, then turned it toward her grandmother. There. The photo showed Vanessa mid-laugh, cocktail in hand. And there it was. The delicate platinum chain, the teardrop diamond glinting beneath her collarbone. Helen's mouth tightened, but she said nothing. Lily hesitated. There's more. Helen looked up. I think I know where it went. The pawn shop sat on the edge of Cicero Avenue, part barbed wire fence, part neon regret. Lily stepped in after school the next day, hood up, phone camera rolling. Hi, she said. I'm looking for a piece that came in last week. Diamond necklace, vintage, Might have been marked as an estate item? The clerk didn't look up. Got ID? I'm not buying. Just browsing? She flashed the school ID and smiled like she was harmless. She wasn't. The man sighed, turned, unlocked a glass case. Came in Saturday, he muttered. Lady said it was a gift from her husband, but she was getting divorced. Real soap opera energy. He pointed. Lily's stomach turned. There it was. Her grandfather's necklace. The clasp she used to play with when Helen wore it to church. The same diamond Helen had once said wasn't the biggest, but it never needed to be. Back in court 2 days later, Vanessa's lawyer tried to delay the hearing. Too late. David stood with the photo in one hand and the pawn ticket in the other. Not only was the necklace stolen, he said, but it was misrepresented and liquidated without consent. The piece appraises at $18,000. That alone qualifies this as grand larceny. He turned, handed both items to the judge. Your Honor, this is no longer a family dispute. It is elder exploitation, and it is criminal. Vanessa's cheeks burned crimson. It was a mistake, she said quickly. I thought it was a gift from years ago. You wore it at a school event, David interrupted, then sold it for cash while standing trial for financial fraud. This is not a mistake. This is a pattern. Judge Howard stared down at the documents in silence, face tight. Then he looked up, voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. This is elder abuse. Vanessa's mouth opened, but no words came. Eric sank in his seat like he wanted to vanish. Helen didn't move. She hadn't moved once. She just sat there, quiet, unblinking, hands folded in her lap like they were made of marble. The judge slammed the folder shut. I will be referring this to the district attorney immediately. Expect additional charges. Outside, the sky was beginning to darken. Inside, the room felt colder than ever. Carol leaned toward Helen. We're past rain, she whispered. This is hail. Helen didn't respond. Her eyes were locked forward. Helen adjusted the sleeves of her blazer as she sat in court. Navy wool. No jewelry. Hair pinned neatly back. She looked like a woman who had nothing to prove and nothing left to lose. But this time, Vanessa wasn't on the defensive. She was armed. Your Honor? Vanessa said crisply, rising to her feet. I'm contesting the validity of the amended trust filed by Mrs. Morris and her counsel. We believe she was coerced, mentally and emotionally manipulated, by outside parties. She cast a quick glance at Lily, specifically, her granddaughter, and Ms. Carol Abrams, who's not a licensed paralegal and may have overstepped legal bounds. The judge's eyes narrowed, but he didn't stop her. Vanessa continued. We have reason to believe Mrs. Morris was pressured into rewriting her estate in a way that's inconsistent with her wishes. David rose slowly, buttoning his jacket like it was part of a ritual. If I may, Your Honor? Judge Howard nodded. David turned to Helen. Did anyone threaten, manipulate, or pressure you into signing the new trust? Helen didn't blink. No. Did you make this decision freely? I did. Why? Because my son failed to protect me, she said. Because my daughter-in-law treated me like a stray dog. And because my granddaughter was the only person in that house who remembered I was still a human being. Vanessa scoffed. She's 17. The judge raised a hand. Mrs. Morris. Vanessa. Let counsel speak. David held up the trust document. The trust was executed in my office, witnessed, notarized, and properly filed. There's a video recording of the signing. Carol Abrams was present, but never touched a legal form. All filings were handled through my firm. He paused. But if the court would prefer, we're prepared to show the video. Vanessa froze. David raised a brow. Shall we? Vanessa's lawyer whispered something urgently in her ear. She sat. The judge leaned forward. Any other objections? Vanessa opened her mouth, then hesitated. She's not of sound judgment, she said. She slapped me at dinner, remember? She's erratic, vindictive. The judge stared at her. That same woman has successfully defended herself in court 3 times, remained composed under direct questioning, and had the foresight to report a financial crime and recover stolen property through proper legal channels. That doesn't sound erratic to me. He turned to Lily. Do you wish to speak? Lily stood, legs shaky but steady. Only this. No one made my grandmother do anything, but if we hadn't stepped in, my parents would have buried her under their debt and called it love. A hush fell over the room. The judge nodded, closed the file, and spoke in a clear, final voice. Contest dismissed. Carol let out a quiet breath. David reached for his briefcase, but paused as a bailiff entered, carrying a new folder with a red seal. "Your Honor," the bailiff said. "Investigations Unit. Time-sensitive disclosure." The judge accepted it, flipped through the first few pages, and frowned. "What is this?" Vanessa asked, instantly uneasy. Judge Howard looked up, eyes colder now. "It appears investigators from the fraud unit have been combing financial records tied to the forged loan. In doing so, they uncovered multiple gambling transactions tied to an offshore account in your husband's name." Vanessa turned slowly toward Eric. Eric went pale. "What?" she said, her voice cracking. "Tell me that's a mistake." Eric couldn't speak, just stared. The judge continued. "Records show upwards of $140,000 in unreported gambling debt over the last 2 years. Most of it hidden through cash withdrawals, off-the-books transfers, and wire transactions linked to mobile betting platforms. The loan tied to Mrs. Morris's name, the one you forged, would have cleared nearly all of it." Silent. It roared. Vanessa's mouth trembled. "You said it was your bonus, that you were saving, that—" Eric finally looked up. "I thought I could fix it." She turned away like she'd been slapped. Helen didn't say a word, but her eyes were sharp as knives. The courtroom had barely cleared before the headlines hit. "Widow's signature forged to cover gambling debt. Suburban couple accused of elder fraud larceny. Teen granddaughter secretly recorded family's abuse. And lawyers are listening." The local news station aired Lily's recording that night, with names slightly blurred for privacy but voices crystal clear. Vanessa's insults, Helen's quiet resistance, the dry click of a fork hitting porcelain. It was all there. By morning, the whispers had grown teeth. Helen sat at the kitchen table. Not their kitchen anymore. She was staying at Carol's for the week, while locks were changed and legal noise settled. The paper lay in front of her, untouched. The headline was enough. She sipped her tea. Carol stood behind the stove, scrambling eggs with surgical precision. "They're toast," she said. "Criminal court is just a matter of time now." Helen didn't answer. Carol turned. "You're not gloating. Why aren't you gloating?" "Because it's not over," Helen replied, setting down her cup. "You don't gloat while the walls are still falling. You wait until the dust clears. If it ever does." Carol studied her for a moment, then nodded. Back in court, David stacked 2 new folders onto the bench before the judge. "These are financial disclosures obtained through a subpoena of Eric Morris's accounts. What we found was a years-long pattern of debt accumulation, asset funneling, and online gambling through offshore platforms using proxy servers, some linked directly to the loan in question, others older." He flipped to the summary. He used his mother's name as a safety net, and when that wasn't enough, his wife turned predatory. The judge didn't look up. "We're beyond civil fraud now." The courtroom had shifted. It felt colder, heavier, not with tension, but condemnation. Even the bailiffs didn't look at Vanessa anymore. Eric stared straight ahead, eyes glassy. His fingers twitched. Every so often he flinched, like he was hearing something no one else could. Vanessa, for the first time, was silent. Even her posture had changed. No more false dignity, no fake tears, just collapse, inch by inch. Helen remained composed. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Judge Howard leaned forward. "Mrs. Morris, I want to personally thank you. Most people in your position would have stayed silent. Your clarity, your courage, it has prevented an ongoing crime from worsening." Helen inclined her head slightly. "It wasn't courage," she said softly. "It was necessity." That afternoon, Lily sat with Rachel Kim, the local reporter who'd first covered the story online. They met at a coffee shop, away from court. No cameras, just a notepad and a small mic clipped to Rachel's collar. "I wasn't brave," Lily said. "I just knew it wasn't okay anymore. Watching someone you love get crushed under people who claim to love them. You reach a point where you either speak or you become part of it." Rachel nodded. "Did you feel unsafe?" Lily hesitated. "Not physically, but emotionally? All the time." She reached into her backpack and pulled out her phone. This one never aired. She played the clip, Vanessa yelling. The phrase, "Maybe I should just sell her ring too," crackled through the speakers. The sound of a drawer slamming. Then Eric, in the background. "You need to calm down. She's not dead yet." Rachel blinked. "May I?" Lily nodded. The clip aired that night. By morning, public sentiment had flipped entirely. Back at Carol's, Helen folded laundry with quiet care. Soft flannel, fleece-lined cardigan, fresh socks. The small things no one noticed until they were gone. Carol stood by the window, phone in hand. The press just called the house an empire built on fraud. Helen didn't look up. Carol turned toward her. That empire's ash now. Helen folded another shirt, crisp and perfect. Ash is quiet. Ash doesn't scream. Carol smiled grimly. But it still smolders. Helen nodded once, then turned toward the window. The sky was clear, cold, brittle. Snow would come soon, and when it did, it wouldn't melt quickly. The sign went up before breakfast. Notice of trustee sale printed in red, stapled to the front door. A second notice, larger and laminated, was taped across the garage. Vanessa stared at it like it was written in another language. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Eric stepped outside in pajama pants and slippers. He looked at the sign, then at the SUV in the driveway. The repo sticker on the windshield was fresh. The bank had moved fast. Too fast. Vanessa ripped the paper from the door and read it again. "This is a mistake. It has to be." "It's not," Eric said, his voice hollow. "What do you mean it's not?" "I called the lender last week," he muttered. "We missed 3 payments. They gave us a 10-day window. That window's gone." "You said you'd fixed it." "I said I was trying." He rubbed the back of his neck. "There's nothing left to fix it with, Vanessa." She turned toward the house like it might disappear if she didn't touch it. "This is our home." Eric didn't answer. Inside, the lights were still off. A mug sat half full on the counter. The heat had been turned down. Another quiet measure from the mortgage company as they prepared the paperwork. It was happening. At a quiet office just 3 miles away, a closing agent clicked her pen and smiled at the woman across the table. "Congratulations, Ms. Adams. The trust purchase has gone through. The property is yours. Keys will be mailed, but we can have them couriered if you prefer." Helen smiled faintly. "Mail is fine." She signed with a steady hand. The name on the documents was a shell corporation tied to her new trust. Her fingerprints wouldn't show up until it was far too late for anyone to scream. Carol sat beside her, arms crossed, watching the ink dry. "I have to ask," she said quietly. "Why buy it? Why not let the bank eat it?" Helen folded the paperwork into her bag. "Because I built that house." Carol arched a brow. "Not with your name on the deed." "No," Helen agreed, "but with my money, my patience, my silence. Every slab of granite, every chandelier, every walk-in closet. They used my retirement and called it ambition." Carol didn't speak. Helen stood. "Now it's mine again," she said. "They just don't know it yet." News of the foreclosure spread fast. Social media, local real estate blogs, even a segment on the morning news. Luxury home of accused couple repossessed in fraud fallout. Vanessa didn't go outside for 2 days. When she finally did, it was to scream at the repo man who came for the second vehicle, Eric's leased truck. Lily watched from across the street, seated on a curb in her school hoodie, sipping iced coffee. She didn't wave, just smirked. It wasn't spite. Not really. It was satisfaction. Earned, hard-fought, and quiet. Eric walked the halls like a ghost. He touched the doorknobs, opened drawers that used to be full. He stood in the master bathroom staring at the empty vanity. The jewelry had been taken. The perfume bottles were gone. "Where are we going to go?" he asked. Vanessa didn't answer. "Vanessa." She stood in the closet, gripping a single dress on a hanger like it might hold her upright. Her face was blank. "Maybe we could ask for help," Eric said, the words sour in his mouth. She turned slowly. "From who?" He didn't say it, but they both knew what he meant. She laughed bitterly. "I'd rather burn the place down." Eric didn't reply, because he knew it already had. Helen sat on Carol's porch that evening, wrapped in a wool shawl, a cup of black tea steaming in her hand. Lily stepped outside, phone in hand. "Have you seen this?" Helen glanced up. Lily handed over the screen. A video of Vanessa yelling at a moving truck had gone semi-viral. Neighbors had filmed from their windows. "This is elder abuse against me," she screamed at a man in a reflective vest. Helen read the caption aloud. "Justice spins slow, but when it hits," she handed the phone back. "Let it spin." Lily smiled. "You don't even need to say anything, do you?" Helen took a long sip of her tea. "I said it all when I didn't sign that deed." The sheriff's truck arrived at 9:03 a.m., rumbling to a stop in front of the now bank-owned Colonial, with the peeling wreath still hanging crooked on the door. Two uniformed officers stepped out, calm, efficient, not unkind, but unmoved. By 9:06 the moving crew followed, hired by the bank. They didn't knock. They entered. Vanessa screamed. "I have rights!" she howled from the top of the stairs. "This is illegal! You can't just barge in!" One of the movers calmly unplugged the TV. "I'm calling my lawyer." The sheriff glanced up. "Do that." Eric was on the couch, head in his hands, motionless. Out on the street, a cluster of neighbors had gathered quietly, slippers, coffee mugs, folded arms. No one spoke. Some had phones out. Some didn't bother. They all knew what this was. Parked at the end of the block, a dark blue sedan idled quietly. Inside, Helen sat in the back seat, hands folded in her lap, Carol in the front, Lily between them. From her window, Helen could see the porch where she used to trim roses, the driveway where she'd taught Eric to ride a bike, the corner step where she'd once dropped groceries, and Lily had helped pick them up. It all looked smaller now, less like a home, more like a crime scene. Vanessa burst onto the lawn, barefoot, hair wild. "I have a right to stay here. My things are still in there." A deputy calmly replied, "You can retrieve your belongings later. A court-appointed inventory team will be in touch." Vanessa shrieked, "Where is the judge? This is an ambush!" Eric finally followed her out. Slowly, one box in his hands, eyes vacant. His hoodie was stained, his voice gone. Lily leaned over, watching them through the glass. "That's justice." Helen didn't smile, but her chest rose and fell in one long, deep breath, the kind you don't realize you've been holding until it's released. Carol turned slightly in her seat. "Dinner tables reset." Helen nodded once. Outside, a mover accidentally dropped a box on the lawn. Something glass shattered inside. Vanessa let out a sound like a wounded animal. "That was my grandmother's china." Helen's fingers twitched just once. Lily looked over at her. "Want to go?" Helen shook her head. "Not yet." A half-hour later, the last of the furniture was loaded onto a truck bearing the bank's seal. The front door was locked with a fresh bolt. A white sticker had been slapped over the old address plaque. Eric and Vanessa stood beside their battered minivan, defeated. Helen watched as Vanessa turned to Eric and slapped him. Not hard, not dramatic, but final. Eric didn't respond, just stared at the concrete like it was answering for something. Vanessa got into the passenger seat. Eric slid in behind the wheel. They didn't look back as they drove off. Helen's eyes didn't follow them. Only the house, her house. Not by name, but by origin. Carol turned the key in the ignition. What now? Helen looked out the window one last time. The movers, the tape, the silence. She exhaled. "We go home," she said. That night, the neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. The foreclosure video had been edited down to a 30-second news clip. The headline, "Former socialite evicted amid fraud case. Justice for elderly widow." Comments poured in. Support, outrage, admiration. But Helen didn't read them. She stood on Carol's back porch, breathing in the cold air. It smelled clean. Her phone buzzed once. A message from David. "Court has finalized full transfer. You and Lily are the only legal heirs. The rest? Gone." Helen closed the phone. Carol stepped out beside her. "You okay?" Helen looked up at the stars. For once, they didn't seem out of reach. "I'm getting there." The courtroom felt quieter than usual. Not empty, just still. Like the air was waiting for something. Helen sat in her usual seat, Lily beside her, hands clasped in her lap. David, stone-faced, stood ready. Across the aisle, Eric looked like a shell dressed in a suit. His tie was crooked, his eyes sunken. The weight of weeks, months, hung from his shoulders like soaked fabric. Vanessa sat stiffly beside him, makeup fresh but failing to hide the blotchy skin beneath. She no longer glared. She didn't have the energy. Judge Howard took the bench without ceremony. "This hearing is to finalize all matters related to the estate of Robert and Helen Morris, including trust reassignment, asset distribution, and financial restitution." Eric stood shakily. "Your Honor, may I speak?" The judge gave a slow nod. Eric turned toward Helen, not with anger but something close to pleading. "I know I've made mistakes," he began, "but I'm still her son. I grew up in that house, that inheritance. It was supposed to be mine, or at least part of it. I never wanted this. I was drowning and I didn't know how to ask for help. He glanced toward Lily. You don't understand what pressure does to a man. Lily didn't flinch. I'm not asking for everything, Eric continued. Just a portion. Enough to start over, to get help, to live. The judge turned to Vanessa. She rose slowly. I was angry, she said, but I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I thought Helen was losing her grip. We were trying to protect her. All that footage. It was cherry-picked, twisted. I never meant to abuse her. Judge Howard cut in. Mrs. Morris, you forged her signature, you liquidated her assets, you sold her necklace, and you stood silently while your husband buried his mother in debt. Vanessa blinked, faltered. He continued, voice colder now. What you did isn't a difference of perspective. It's not a misunderstanding. It's a pattern of abuse, fraud, and exploitation. He turned to Helen. Do you wish to speak before the ruling? Helen rose. She didn't walk to the stand, didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at the judge. I've said all I need to say, she said, but I will say this. I survived not because I had power, but because I remembered who I was before they made me small. She looked at Eric. I was your mother long before she was your wife. I never stopped being her, even when you stopped being my son. He swallowed hard, but didn't speak. The judge opened the folder. Effective immediately, all remaining trust assets, real estate, investment portfolios, remaining cash holdings, will transfer solely to Helen Morris and her legal successor, Lily Morris. He looked at Vanessa and Eric. You are removed from the trust in its entirety, permanently. No further claims will be recognized. Vanessa gasped. Eric dropped into his chair like gravity had doubled. The gavel hit the bench. One final heavy strike. Court adjourned. Outside, snow had started to fall. Light, silent, relentless. Helen stepped into the courthouse lobby and turned to David. I want to make a statement. To the press? To the future. A week later, the local news ran the headline, Widow donates $2.4 million to women's shelters across Chicago. The press release was simple. No interviews, no press tour. Just a single quote at the bottom. Silence can protect or destroy. This time, it will shelter. Helen Morris. Lily found her grandmother reading the paper that evening, the fire low behind her. You didn't tell me, Lily said. Helen folded the page. It was never mine to keep. You could have bought the house back outright, rebuilt everything. I did rebuild everything, Helen said. Just not where they expected. Lily looked at her. You're not angry anymore, are you? Helen took a deep breath. No, she said. I'm done being angry. She looked at the window, at the falling snow. I'm something else now. The first brick was laid in silence. No press, no ribbon cutting, no speeches. Just Helen, standing beneath the gray winter sky as the first wall of the Morris Foundation shelter for women and children rose from the frozen ground. The contractor offered her a ceremonial trowel. She declined. It's not for show, she said. Just make it solid. A week later, the story broke. Widow who took down suburban scandal builds shelter with settlement funds. Local news led with it. A photo of Helen in a dark coat, hair tucked back, one hand resting gently on Lily's shoulder. No smile, no performance, just presence. Inside the article, the fund's mission was outlined plainly: provide safe, discreet housing for women escaping domestic and financial abuse. No red tape, no shame. Just a door that opened. Helen had named Lily as the trust's official steward. I don't need to outlive my legacy, she'd told the board quietly. I just need to pass it to someone who won't waste it. Lily had cried in the car after, not from pressure, from the gravity of it, from being seen. The fund opened with 5 properties. 3 more were in development. One of them, the first, would sit just 3 blocks from the school where Lily had once recorded her mother screaming over coffee. This building will outlive all of us, Lily said at the soft launch, and it will hear things none of us ever said out loud, but it will never ignore them. Her voice trembled, but she never looked down. Carol stood at the back, clapping the slowest, proudest applause in the room. Later, she found Helen by the coat rack. You know you just built a house for 100 strangers, she said. Helen adjusted her scarf. Not strangers, survivors. Carol shook her head, a little teary. You rewrote the ending. Most people never even get to edit. Helen looked out the window. Snow again. Always snow. I didn't edit it, she said. I just waited for the chapter that mattered. Weeks passed. The noise faded. Vanessa's name disappeared from headlines. Eric's LinkedIn went dark. No one asked where they'd gone. No one needed to. Helen returned to Carol's porch most evenings. The same wool shawl. The same cup of tea. Only this time, the weight had shifted. One night, Lily joined her, barefoot, blanket around her shoulders. The first resident moved in today, Lily said. She had a little boy. Didn't say much, but he smiled when he saw the bunk beds. Helen nodded. There are dozens more on the waiting list, Lily added. We'll build more. Lily turned to her. Do you ever miss it? The house? No. The war. Helen smiled faintly. I don't miss fighting, she said. I miss who I became to survive it. She looked out into the quiet dark. But I'm not her anymore, and that's a different kind of. On the night of the shelter's official ribbon cutting, Helen stood just off stage. Not in the spotlight. Not anymore. She didn't speak. Lily did. So did Carol. So did 3 women who'd walked through that shelter's door and refused to walk back to what had broken them. Helen just watched, listened, and when the final speaker ended with a quote from the fund's mission, "Silence has power, if spoken in the right place," Helen let herself close her eyes, not in exhaustion, in arrival. Later that night, in her room at Carol's, Helen sat on the edge of the bed, looking through an old photo album. One page held a worn Polaroid, Lily as a toddler, asleep in Helen's lap. No house, no drama, just peace. Carol knocked once, then stepped in. We're officially on the news again, she said. This time, no fraud, just fire codes and zoning permit. Helen chuckled softly. Progress. Carol sat beside her. You ready to call it a life? Helen turned the page. Not quite yet, she said. I think I have one more chapter left. Carol raised an eyebrow. Want to write it? Helen looked at the blank space beside the last photo. No, she said, voice steady. I want to live it. The table was smaller than the one Helen had sat at a year ago, but it was hers. A simple reclaimed pine top, set for 3. Linen napkins folded with care. A ceramic bowl of roasted carrots. A turkey breast resting on a wooden board. A pecan pie cooling in the kitchen. Outside, snow blanketed the street. The kind of snow that stayed quiet. The kind that covered the world like forgiveness. Lily poured cider into 3 mismatched glasses. Carol lit the last candle, then sat back, smiling at the glow. I forgot what dinner feels like when no one's performing, she said. Helen, seated at the head of the table, gave a soft smile. That's because no one's pretending they're in charge. Lily snorted gently into her cider. The plaque sat behind them on the mantel. Brass, square, quiet. Morris Foundation shelter built in silence. Open in strength. Carol raised her glass. To dignity, she said. That cannot be slapped away. They all clinked. No dramatic speeches, no violins, just the kind of stillness that can't be faked. Helen took a bite of the carrots, savoring the warmth. These are better than anything I ever made when the house was full. Carol raised an eyebrow. Because you weren't cooking, you were surviving. Helen didn't argue. After dinner, Lily brought the pie out, carefully sliced, steam curling up from the golden crust. Tell me this was a store-bought crust, Carol said, eyeing it suspiciously. Nope, Lily said proudly. Helen taught me. We rolled it together yesterday. Carol took a bite and nearly melted into her chair. I take back every joke I've ever made about your generation. They laughed, all 3 of them. Nothing forced. No undercurrent of panic beneath the surface. After dessert, Lily gathered the dishes and brought them to the sink, humming softly under her breath. Carol disappeared briefly and returned with a red envelope. Almost forgot. This came to my office yesterday. For you. She handed it to Helen. No return address, just her name, in shaky cursive. Helen opened it slowly. Inside was a Christmas card. Cheap. Generic. The kind sold at drugstores in packs of 10. The message was printed in red foil. Wishing you peace this holiday season. Beneath it, scribbled in pen. You were always stronger than me. I never admitted it. I hope you're okay. Eric Helen stared at it for a long moment, then folded it and set it in the fire without a word. Carol watched the flames curl. Lily stepped in from the kitchen. Everything okay? Helen nodded. Perfect. Later, Lily sat cross-legged in front of the fireplace, reading by candlelight. Carol dozed gently on the couch. Helen moved through the kitchen in slow, deliberate motion, rinsing pie plates, drying glasses. No hurry. When the clock struck 9, Lily looked up. You remember last Christmas? She asked softly. Helen didn't turn around. Of course. I do too, Lily said. All of it. The slap, the silence, how small you looked. Helen shut the cabinet and finally turned. Was I small? She asked. Lily shook her head. No. But they wanted you to be. Helen sat beside her. There were no presents, no decorations, just a candle, a fire, and 3 women who had chosen one another over survival. Lily leaned her head on Helen's shoulder. I think about it a lot, she said. What Mom said to you before the slap? Helen nodded. So do I. There was a long pause. Then Lily whispered. She said, stay quiet. Helen reached for Lily's hand, squeezed it gently, and smiled. I stayed quiet, she said, then looked at the fire. But only to the lawyer.